Okay, and we are live. Thank you everyone who's joining us. For those who are over the holidays or traveling to be with family or just avoiding the bad weather like Adam and I have, or just discussing the bad snow out where he's at and all the rain where I'm at. These have been a weird year for weather, but thank you for joining us wherever you're at. This so far is the last officially scheduled hangout of Human MOOC. There have been some great participant-led hangouts that will probably still continue to happen. So I encourage you, if you want to participate in one of those, to pay attention to Twitter and join in those, because those have been very helpful. And I really enjoyed listening what the participants have to say about the course. And I've learned a lot from everyone that joined in one of those. But for this last hangout, invited Adam Kroom to join us, and I'll let him introduce himself a little bit more. He joins us not only as someone who has done a lot of work in the area of humanizing the online instruction, but as also a past participant in this course. And so I'm sure he'll share some of his experience with that. But I just want to throw it over to you, Adam, if you introduce yourself real quick. And then I wanted you to, since this week's topic is cognitive presence, we'll start there. And we can go wherever we want to go after that. But a lot of these terms seem to have different definitions for different people. So if you, after you introduce yourself, if you could also explain to us what cognitive presence means to you.
Sure. Matt, thanks so much for letting me do this. Thanks as well to Whitney and Maha. As you mentioned, I'm a past student of Human MOOC. I wear my my Human MOOC digital badges very proudly. So thank you guys for what you do. I'm inspired by the fact that this keeps going each and every year, and I'm excited to be able to participate in whatever level I can. So my name is Adam Kroom. I work at the University of Oklahoma as the Director of Digital Learning. I'm also an instructor in the Gaylord College of Journalism and Mass Communications, and teach face-to-face courses on graphic design and advertising and public relations, as well as online courses that have to do it as well. You can find my my course site at prpubs.us, and I'm sure we'll get into how I feel about how domains and blogs can help with cognitive presence as well. But if I was to maybe give a definition of cognitive presence as talked about within the inquiry framework, for me, it's about how can we leverage what's happening within our specific domains and within the context of our courses to help students embed their learning and be able to explain it, and to some degree be able to have a better understanding of their own life and their own world as well, and kind of contextualize what we're talking about in class with maybe with prior knowledge, which they've got before, or within the context of their cultural outlook, whatever it is, ways in which they can start to synthesize together prior knowledge and in the context of the course in a way that feels valuable towards the outcome of what you're trying to do within the course as well.
Good, yeah, I like that. Yeah, I would agree with that. So I had a train of thought and then just kind of skipped out of my mind, sorry.
Okay.
But I'm still on vacation too myself, so I have to engage the processing in my brain. So when you talk about engaging students in this way, do you feel that is something that the student is primarily responsible for? Do you think that is something that the instructor or instructional designer is responsibility for? Or where do you think the responsibility for this type of cognitive presence and this engagement that you're talking about live?
So I certainly think that as an instructor, we can facilitate opportunities for this to actually happen. So to talk a little bit about my course. So my course is a 16-week, normal semester course. It's made up of 5 projects that have about 15 lessons. And within one of those lessons, we are I'm having them do some sort of reflection assignment, in which I'm asking my students, what were you asked to do in this lesson, and how did you react to what I was asking you to do before you even started it, and then what did you actually do, and why did you react that specific way? And what I'm trying to do is trying to get, students to kind of have a metacognitive look of what did we just do, and not just to kind of put down on a diary of, why did you do this? I kind of always fall back on the scene in Forrest Gump where the drill sergeant, walks up to Forrest Gump and asks him, like, why did he put the gun together so quickly? And he's like, because you told me to, drill sergeant, and it's like, it's not just that. Like, we want him to go a little bit farther and say, it wasn't just because I told you to do it, but there was some kind of reaction that you actually had to this, right? That you might have been concerned that you hadn't studied enough for the lesson, and that you were kind of overwhelmed by what was coming before, or you didn't feel that your skills had prepared you for what we were doing before as well. But as you worked within the environment, as you sat within it, as you thought about it, as you actually performed the exercises, that may or may have not changed. The objective for me is I'm just trying to get you to think about, has anything happened, right? Has any of your ideas actually shifted? And so I think that's where it exists, on the instructor side, is we can kind of set up frameworks that help students actually work through this actual idea itself. Certainly there's degrees to which students can engage, towards that, and some might be a lot more introspective than others, or feel that they can adequately talk to what they were doing, based off of some sort of past experience. But I certainly think as instructors, we can encourage and help students start to frame out these ideas of how do you reflect on what you're doing, and how do you continually look at what you're doing and think about it within the broader context of what you've learned, across your life.
That's good. And I found, at least in my classes, because I also try to encourage that kind of reflection too. I just teach some junior level instructional design courses from time to time. It seems like it's a huge paradigm shift for them to go from just taking tests, doing paper, doing what the instructor says, to actually owning that kind of reflective process, or even doing a first reflection. It's kind of like, well, what do you want me to say? And I'm like, I don't have anything that I want you to say. I want you to tell me what you want to say about what's going on, whatever it may be, whatever you're learning, whatever you're not learning, whatever you're, whatever is connected to this topic, tell me. I think it's a good point to make. That it's a hard paradigm shift. Do you have any maybe ideas or tips for, I don't want to say tricking, but encouraging students to kind of make this paradigm shift, or anything that you've done that particularly works to help them transition from that kind of instructivist mindset of following just what the instructor does to taking more ownership over their learning?
Yeah, sure. So I'd say the first thing is where does this discussion take place? And for me, mine takes place on students' WordPress websites, right? And that particular application is not necessarily what I advocate for the best thing for everything, although I have strong feelings about it. But I would say that for my class, in which we're actually trying to build a portfolio towards the end, it's actually kind of helpful. But I would say that the space does matter, right? Your ability to write down what your day was like, within your own book, within something that's owned by yourself, you're telling your story, and it's something that you get to take with you. So I think that's part of it that matters. I used to do. I've always done reflection, whether blogs were included or not. My class is about creativity. It's about design. It's a subject in which most of my students coming in have zero knowledge before. They've never touched, Photoshop and InDesign and Illustrator and stuff like that. And so I've always had the reflection paper built in, so students could say, here's what I was trying to do, right? Like I had this idea and it sort of came out on paper, but to some degree it didn't. But I kind of want to defend, what you do see, And so I've always had ways in which students can, can talk about what they're doing. It used to be something that they submitted through, it was as traditional as it could be, a one-page, double-spaced typed paper in which they could send, through the learning management system. And I would ask them, talk about, refer to the principles of graphic design in this, whether it's contrast or repetition or alignment or proximity. And what I would get was these kind of sterile sterile reflections that were like the contrast was this, the repetition was this, and it bothered me because I felt like, we weren't reflecting on anything. And then, the more I thought about it, the more I realized that within that means of reflection, there was a couple things in which was going on there, which I could do better as an instructor. And one of those they were writing to an audience of one, right? Like I was the only person that was going to read them. It was disposable, as David Wiley would say. At no point did that paper ever matter again to anybody, and it mattered very little to me, and the students knew that, and so they lived up to that expectation. And when I moved it over to a public space, to a blog, to something they owned and they could take with them, first I saw that they weren't just writing to me. A lot of times the reflections would include tips to other students, or it'd be something that they'd share with family. Look what I did in class. Look, I'm proud of this piece in which I was able to accomplish. You can see it. You can kind of walk me through my process itself. And then I'd say the other thing in which I was doing is we were only reflecting on the final submission, right? We were reflecting one time, which was when it was over. And these projects, they last, anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks. And so as I moved over to blogs, and a piece of advice that I would give is do it often, make it something that becomes a part of habit for the student as well. Because what you'll see is while they might write in that sort of rubric fashion at first, writing very, very, quickly to the prompt, as they see how I engage with that material, as they see how other peers engage with that material, their writing style will change, and it'll start to kind of fill out itself. They'll start to write with a different style. They'll find their own voice as they're going through it as well, and it becomes this sort of semester-long process. So what I'd say to instructors is that if you've been discouraged by reflection before, me too, we're in the same boat. Stick with it. Right, writing is hard, for anyone to learn or teach. A lot of people are better at it than others, but have students in that process of actually doing it consistently. I think that's the only way that we're gonna, they're gonna actually get better of it, and they're gonna become more comfortable within the medium and within the voice and tone for which I'm trying to get from them from a reflection post.
Yeah, it's good, and that's one thing I found too with the reflection is that if it happens more often, it gets better. Even if you're stuck with certain tools within the LMS, even if they're starting to reflect on the discussion boards, it still gets better as they go along. But there's still that ownership process, which you talked about, which I think also makes another huge difference. And one thing I've also found too, though, is that my dissatisfaction with the reflective process was not with all the students. It was with, say half the students or 3/4 of the students, but there was still that section of the students that still did very well reflecting in papers and still did very well reflecting in discussion forums. And so that's kind of led me down a path of the choice, the student choice, and the pathways designed to where we have those students that choose to do, who want to do different, basically different artifacts, blogs or papers, or whatever, or videos, or even have that choice. I think that feeds into the other project that you kind of are known for, especially if people follow you on Twitter, is working with domains of one's own, and the different contributions you've had to that project with Jim Groom and Tim Owens and others. So I want to kind of transition, especially since the 30 minutes kind of fly by pretty fast. Transition to the idea of domains of one's own, the choices that offers learners and faculty, and how that has played into your process of cognitive presence and reflection activities.
Yeah, so I would say maybe 2.5 years ago, us as an institution, we're looking for an e-portfolio solution. Something, I think it was something that our provost was seeing other institutions really do, was interested in the idea of e-portfolios. Met Jim, sometime in, 2012, 2013, and was seeing what was happening with domains of one's own. This idea of not just giving students a solution, but really giving students an infrastructure to have multiple solutions, and to really have something that mimicked what it looks like to actually work within the web. And so we started, we contacted Jim and said, how are you guys doing this domain of one's own project at the University of Mary Washington? I mean, literally give us the specs of, what servers do we need to buy and what software packages. And at the time they were spinning out into like the Reclaim hosting idea, which you can visit at reclaimhosting.com. And I know Alec Couros has touched on a little bit in an earlier Human MOOC Google Hangout. So we said, well, that actually sounds smarter. You guys actually know what you're doing, and we don't. So we'd love to be kind of an institutional partner in something like Reclaim Hosting. And so we've had what's called OU Create, and the ability for anyone at our institution to actually get a domain or now a free subdomain and then install open source applications on it, work within what's called a LAMP environment, and install WordPress or Drupal or MediaWiki, wiki applications onto their sites. We've had 2,070 domains registered since last fall. So I guess 3 traditional semesters in. There's been over 11,000 blog posts. These have been done, mostly been dispersed within courses themselves and courses that actually take this kind of approach. But it's not just about blogging. It's not just about WordPress. Like as I mentioned, there's sites that are portfolios. There's sites that are for informal research groups, that are for faculty, student group projects, building databases, working with databases and things like PHPMyAdmin, learning to code in LAMP environments, learning PHP and HTML, wikis, cloud storage, OER projects, So, it's not entirely just about digital identities, but even broader, it's more about giving this modern web infrastructure for our campus for students to actually be able to play with, and not just have a folder system in which they can drop some HTML files in and be good with, but they can actually have something that is modern and is a content management system to help them manage their digital identity.
Good. And just as a quick reminder, I'm trying to monitor Twitter here, so if anybody's watching and they want to ask us any questions, feel free to tweet it out, and we'll answer them. We have like 10 minutes left, so don't delay on that. But I forgot to say that earlier, sorry. But so for an instructor that wants to utilize this kind of choice, this reflection process, is probably a little bit different than what they're used to, where you give this detailed rubric and students have to hit, point here, point here, point here, point here, point here. And so say someone is someone comes to you, instructor comes to you and says, hey, this sounds great. I want my students to do this better, reflecting and take more ownership. How do I transition my class into doing this? What do I need to do to transition this course that's just all videos and papers and instructor this kind of stuff into doing this? What do I need to do? How would you respond to that instructor?
Yeah, so first I would say to some degree you're going to change the way you think about what your course is supposed to be, right? And that it may not be something in which your students are hitting learning objectives across every lesson, but instead it might be something where it's going to unfold and unravel over time, right? And so the first thing is for us to kind of accept that we're not going to be seeing things hit as often as we want to, because we are really putting it within the students to actually kind of find and understand this. I've been reading a book actually over the break called Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott. I don't know if, I'm sure several people have read by it. She's got a huge online following. Amy Colliard recommended it to me recently. And it's entitled Some Instructions on Writing and Life. And it's great for students who are thinking about writing in general, but it's also people who are trying to put their lives together like me to actually be able to untangle stuff like that. But she has this analogy, which I find really fascinating, and I'm going to try to unravel probably soon in a blog post I'd love people to comment on. But she has this chapter called Polaroids, and this idea of how a Polaroid develops almost slowly, right? And she uses this analogy of taking a picture of a family across the fence. I'll say you're at, say the Santa Monica Pier, and you take a picture of your family, right? And that's the primary thing in which you've done. Like, that's your artifact, right? Like, you've taken that picture itself. But what you seem to notice as you start to look at this Polaroid, right, which is kind of this green, grayish-ish that starts to develop over time is then you notice that like, oh, look, there's a dad and a son in the background, and they're sharing a corn dog, and he's bent over trying to, to share it to her. And you see the Ferris wheel, and you see that, the lights of it are reflecting off the water, and the pillars are actually emerging. It looks as if they're emerging from the ground itself. And what you start to realize is, as we've now taken this documentation and we've done this writing, is we start to see all the other stories that within it. It's actually no longer just something of my family, right? But it's about these ideas of shared experiences. And so what I would say to tie this into the concept of what we're trying to do here is that through reflection, right? Even if we're simply taking the Polaroid, and that's the thing that we're doing, it gives us an opportunity, both from the instructor and from the student, to re-examine our work, right? And come back to it. And so it's not just about assigning someone to blog, but it's about us to look deeper at what are the deeper things in which we are doing within our course. What are the things in which we're trying to see, and what are to some degree, what are some of the meanings of life and the purpose that we're trying to get out of these simple, minute Polaroids or artifacts or essays or whatever it is that we're actually taking. How can we continue to do that? So as someone transitions over this, sticking with my Polaroid analogy, was have students take a lot of Polaroids, whatever those are, whether those are blogs, whether that's a journal or whatever it is, and allow those to be places in which students can look over them, right? And say, okay, well, here's my first draft, and here's my second draft, and here's how something evolved over time, and not even limit it to just me, right? But actually bring peers within the fold and maybe have them looking over it and say, yeah, I see how you're finding this idea of shared experience out of it. I actually see this, and I interpret what you're doing this way, and I think if you actually went in this direction, you might uncover something interesting. But I think it's this idea of how do we start to think about a class where it's not something where we're trying to hit these 50 learning objectives, but it's something in which we're just trying to kind of slowly unravel, right? And develop like a Polaroid and see how something just comes into focus over time. And, if it stays out of focus, what do we learn from that, right? Like, what do we learn about ourselves from that either focusing or not focusing itself? But how do we start to think about these ideas where we put so much ownership of the learning and the spaces into the students themselves, that we're actually giving them a little bit more help in finding out who they are, and what this means to them, and a lot less help on what I want you to know.
Oh, there's Mike. That's good. And have a follow-up question from that, and a question that came in from Twitter from Dang Yule Lines. Well, I have to get to that too. When you touch on something about not hitting 50 learning objectives, I think a lot of instructors think that's great, but then they think, oh, my school will never go for that. My school requires those 50 learning objectives, and it requires all this stuff, and what do I do with that? So as someone who has implemented this at a large, a state university, how do you sell this idea to kind of the admins higher up in a way that deals with their I would say their addiction to objectives and measurable numbers?
Yeah. So the first way that I did this was I simply did it within my class. And it was, 16 students, working on those ideas of blogging and something that eventually comes portfolios. And I would say that, it's something that administrators love, right? Like they can change everything, but they can't change is what happens within the classroom itself, right? Like we can build new buildings, and we can incentivize money this direction, that direction, and et cetera, right? But what they can't do is change it. They sometimes don't have a sense of what's going on in a classroom. And what blogs can allow you to do is actually show you, do you want to see what my classroom looks like? Do you want to see what learning is to me? Well, here you go. You can visit these. You can interact with them. You can comment on them. You can see what the outcomes look like, right? And what it ends up being is, we get to think of the outcome as something entirely different. We get to think of it as, for my class, ends up being this kind of visual representation through something like a portfolio, in which you can walk through it. And on the faculty side, I say, my class is open not just because I like building on the, you know, the WordPress CMS, but because I literally want you guys to see it. Like I'm an instructor. I'm not a professor. If you guys can lend anything to it, I want you to, you know. So look at my course, like, you know, tell me what's missing in it. And what ends up happening is by doing blogs, you know, my college is having a broader conversation about what should the pedagogy of this course actually be, you know, because now we can see different versions of it. It brings some transparency to it. And that's something that, you know, administrators want to see is what do our students look like? What does learning look like? You know, how can that be contextualized in what's happening within our community? And these spaces give a really good way, whether it is blogging, whether it is an undergraduate research project, whether it's, you know, doing geo mapping, you know, or building databases, you know, or using Omeka to pull artifacts from libraries and make, you know, public presentations of those. Whatever it is, these are ways in which, you know, we can not only not just to show administration, but also to engage students in actually creating new knowledge, right? And in creating spaces in which other people can interact with. And you know, I find that the more that I move towards that, the more that I say I want this to be something that's real and has some, you know, some meat to it, and then there's some choice in it, and it becomes more about what you want to learn. You choose, you know, who you want to design the business card for, whatever it is, whatever, you know, whatever carrot I give, the more meaningful it feels towards students, and the less it feels like, you know, our institutions are, you know, practice spaces, you know, but actually ways in which they feel like they're creating and giving meaning towards you know, what they're wanting to do in their education.
That's good. That's kind of what I'm dealing with a lot with where I work is, you know, found faculty want to do it, but they're worried about the administrative reaction to it, or they're just worried about the administration giving them enough time, you know, to do it. And so I think that angle is one that would be very attractive to my, you know, school. It's like, hey, we're going to be producing all this stuff. It's really good to see what learning is like at our school, not only for them, but to show off to the world too. So I like that approach. I just had a couple more minutes left, and I wanted to scroll back to this question from Dang Yule Lines. I'm sure that's you know, code for something else, but this question for you, Adam, is do you know of any campuses around that use a lot of blog writing for writing across the curriculum style projects?
I'm not sure what writing across the curriculum style projects would mean, but if I was to point someone in a direction who's inspired me about how students can write, I would point them towards Laura Gibbs, who's at our institution, University of Oklahoma. Her Twitter handle is Online Course Lady. She has a ton of wiki articles on how students can write, the different things that she shares with her students on how they can do peer feedback, and stuff like that. And it's been inspirational, from one, to see just one person work towards as much as she has, and as much as she's developed towards this, you know, not within a center like I am, within a teaching and learning center, but just what she does just for her students. She's got a ton of articles. It's all open. It's all out on a wiki space, and you can see her online courses as well. I'm sure she's tweeting out those links as I speak. So engage with those, and yeah. And hopefully you glean as much as much from it as I did.
Yeah, she's been tweeting out a lot of good thoughts and comments on it too. I'd encourage anyone to go back and look at the HumanMOOC tag, because we've run out of time. I can't look at all of them. The last one she put, though, I think is a really good one to talk about and with, is that she really hopes students will drive the change by expecting to have blogs and websites for every class, asking where are blogs. Have you seen any of that happening at OU Create? Have you seen some student movement, some grassroots stuff springing up yet?
I've seen it within my college, specifically within the College of Journalism. So we've worked at the intro course level, which is 350 students. I've worked with several faculty within my own college, where, you know, it becomes part of what they expect from the curriculum, is that, you know, they are doing this kind of public documentation, or they're building towards this portfolio, and this portfolio, you know, this portfolio becomes something in which, you know, I've had several students come up to me and say, because of this, you know, I was visiting a news station, and I pulled out my phone and showed them, you know, my blog and things that we had done in different courses, you know, and got an internship, or whatever it is. I can certainly speak from within my discipline, that it is something that is grassroots. And that's what's fun is when you don't deploy these within courses, but I get to still see signups happen, on the OU Create side, and I can see what mage they are. And I clearly see that it's starting to kind of disseminate across these different disciplines really well. So I'd certainly say that within spaces in which it's happening more than once, where it's not just a course about building a portfolio, but it really, which usually happens during your senior capstone. Like that's that's really helpful at that point. But where it hits at the beginning and kind of comes out through the courses, I certainly see that students, are wanting and appreciating, learning these technologies, being in something that stays with them forever, building this larger body of work over time, and it not just being about these little, 4-month blips on a radar that end up as 15 characters on your transcript with a little grade that means very little to an employer. So
that's good. I think and that's what I'm hoping to see too as we implement the Domain of One Zone where I work, and we'll probably see it more is the more of the grassroots, more of the students utilizing it, like Laura said, asking about it and starting to use it too. So, but unfortunately, we have run out of time. 30 minutes kind of flies by pretty fast, and we just want to honor people's time and make sure that we cut it off the 30-minute point. But thank you very much for joining us, and Adam. And if anyone else has any more questions or comments, things, I found Adam is very accessible on Twitter, and we'll answer questions. We'll help you out, and he even flew down to my college and helped us, talk about Domain of One Zone and setting it up there. So I found him, thank you for that help, of course. Thank you for joining us here, and we'll see you around on Twitter.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. Good Human MOOC this year. I'm proud of you guys.
Thanks. I've really enjoyed it. It's been great. I've learned so much from a lot of people. So, and we hope that, and for anyone watching part of HumanMOOC, keep on the good tweets, the good blog posts, the good discussion forum comments, all the great work. If you haven't yet, check out people's work in the discussion forums or in the activity bank, the other places they're posting it. There's some really great work that people are doing. And we will see you out on the open web. Bye, everyone.